Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CoFence webinar, Defending Against the AI Phishing Threat. Today, we're going to talk about what we're seeing from a threat stance in regards to AI within the phishing threat landscape, as well as some actions and activities that we're working on and others should be working on as well, or, at least being able to address insofar as how to defend against all of this. So we're going to talk about, like I mentioned, the current phishing threat landscape, kind of the rise of malicious AI usage, the need for an intelligence-driven approach, and some items on the CoFence side in regards to how we and others can leverage AI to reduce certain analysis burdens, how generative AI can actually be used within cybersecurity, and overall augmented or predictive intelligence for AI or using AI, leveraging AI. So today we have four different presenters who will, as we go through, you'll meet each of them. Myself, I'm Josh Bartolome, and I'm the VP of Global Threat Services here at CoFence. I manage a variety of our different, threat services, as well as our managed phishing defense center. So kind of get a really solid insight into the overall threat landscape. Talking about the threat landscape. So, these numbers fluctuate depending on, the time of year, the year, and really who's reporting what the data modeling is. But generally speaking, if we look at averages, an average, of 78%, sometimes you'll see 50%, sometimes you'll see 95%, but an average of 78% of all data breaches are actually attributed to phishing attacks, which is a fairly significant number overall. Generally, out of the thousands of phishing attacks we all receive every single day, about 15% of them actually make it into inboxes. And I can actually correlate these numbers to what we're seeing in our phishing defense center. So for every email that we get reported, it really does equal anywhere between the 13 and 15% hitting an inbox. Based on our own research internally, as well as other reports that are out there that other organizations or research firms publish, the average for employees clicking on a malicious link, is around 12%. So that's almost 1 out of every 10 emails are actually being actioned by an employee or by an end user. And on average, the risk of a phishing attack or the impact of a phishing attack generally has about a 10-day dwell time. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the email is sitting there unactioned for 10 days, right? It means that at the point of click or at the point of entering in credentials or downloading, the document that might be malicious, it generally takes about 10 days before that action is actually identified throughout most organizations, through a lot of organizations. So one of the things that we've seen, in CoFence, we've been doing this for a long time, going through and looking at, the variety of different threats, the phishing threat landscape, obviously simulations and everything along those lines. And what we've seen is, generally speaking, when we're talking about unwanted email, you have two categories: spam, because nobody wants to deal with spam, right? And threats, those actual malicious emails that from a security perspective, obviously, we're the most concerned with. And what's interesting is you can actually break those down into three different types of tiering insofar as the impact and the granularity or focus, if you will, of those threats or of the spam. Some you have the general purpose stuff, right? I mean, that's the spray and pray. That's the old school script kiddie, just volumetric approach. Threat actors or individual groups or individuals are just sending out scams and phishing emails, millions at a time, just to kind of get out there. It's real generic stuff. Others are more category specific, right? These are where you get into whether it's a specific technology that a lot of organizations use. Microsoft, you might get a phishing email that's spoofing Microsoft. Or geopolitical, we're in an election year here in the US. And so there's a lot of phishing attacks that are now leveraging that theme, the political theme, on both sides, of the spectrum, as phishing templates, as well as geo events, environmental events, recent hurricanes, things along those lines. And then you get tailored. Now, this would be, for most of us, that would be spear phishing, right? So this is threat actors are actually looking at what's the organization I want to get into. I want to hit finance organization. So they kind of tailor their messaging to a finance organization, or they're looking at a specific company and they're enumerating that company to see what technology are you using? What email security gateway are you using? What other providers are you using, which they can find out through basic enumeration, DNS pooling, things along those lines. So they're kind of doing a little bit more research and tailoring the message to you, to your employees, so that way they can have better odds, really, of somebody actioning, of that, 12, 15% to become more 20, 25% of your employees clicking. So AI. It's in the news. It's been in the news for quite a while now, right? It's mostly on the offensive side of it, and obviously within the security space, insofar as how it's impacting us as defenders, how it's impacting organizations. And I'm not going to say it's all roses, right? There is actually an impact here, and we are seeing a stark increase in the volumes and sophistications of phishing emails, month over month is kind of where we are today. There's, what a lot of people don't realize, and kind of here's the situation that we're dealing with right now, for the attackers, the bad guys, right? Them leveraging AI is, generally speaking, insanely simple. They don't have to have any experience because they can leverage the latest and the greatest technology with a little bit of learning. And they have, obviously, especially when you talk about like nation state actors or even just threat syndicates, threat groups, they have people that can dedicate on one or two things, and they can just dive into it very quickly. It's oftentimes free for them, right? Because either they're stealing the services, they compromise the account and are stealing the services, or they're using illicit funds that they've already gained to pay for the services. So it's almost equivalent, depending on what the threat actor group is, unlimited funds, right? It's effective. It's scary effective because they can iterate quickly. They can move, they can pivot, they can send out test samples, which is what we see all the time. They'll send out bursts of a new tactic to see what the effectiveness rate is. And doing that, they can actually identify new tactics, new vectors, new nuances, change a here, a change there, that increases their success rate, which also allows them to create that tone, create that intent, kind of really get in there. Now, why can they do all this? They have no tech debt, right? Like an organization would. They have relatively an unlimited budget, right? They don't have customers they have to service or shareholders they got to appease. And they literally can just drop everything and move to the next thing. And they can just quickly iterate. They're not bound by the same compliance legalities that, organizations are, that defenders are, defending vendors as well. Now look at the good guys, the defenders, us, everybody on this call. AI can be insanely complex. How do you build it? How do you interact with it? How do you leverage it? How do you trust it? How do you train it? What's the compliance requirements? What's the privacy regulations we got to adhere to? How are we doing data cleansing, data storage? All of it. Extremely complex. Specialized experience is required because of all that I just mentioned. And we're really focused on accuracy because we want the things that we're building to not give false positives, false negatives, things along those lines. The reality is current implemented AI in most cyber defense technologies isn't much better than the state of the art when you look at, automation, auto enrichment, leveraging of, intelligence vectors, intelligence patterning, things along those lines. It's not that much more effective. It is a little bit, don't get me wrong. There is some gains here, but adding into that with the cost, the implementations, the concerns, and the oversights, it's a balance, right? And our efficiency in detection accuracy overall is slow because we have to retrain, we have to update every time you do a retrain of an AI. It costs more money. We don't know, our AI doesn't know, right, about new threat vectors unless we see them, unless we train that AI to do so, which means we're always kind of that half step, quarter step behind the threat actors. And the reality is it's hard. It's hard to tell the difference between a real email and a fake email, especially if it's AI generated, especially when you look at the volume of data breaches over the last year, even where data was actually compromised and then made available publicly or on the dark web, marketplace. And the volume of that data that actually contained email from an organization. So now threat actors can actually just dump all those emails into a large language model, an LLM, and now actually craft emails using the same vernacular that company uses, the same keywords, the same jargon, How would you tell? It makes it that much more difficult. So everything I kind of said was like, well, this could happen, this could happen, this will happen, this might happen, right? But what's actually happened? What are we actually seeing? Well, there is a lot in the news lately about deepfakes, which is probably the predominant larger impact, if you will, of malicious AI usage insofar as phishing attacks. Right? There was one earlier this year, I think it was around February of this year, a Hong Kong organization, actually a global organization, but based out of Hong Kong, where the a finance worker received an email right from the CFO that they wanted to talk on a video chat. So this worker got on the video chat, and there was the CFO as well as other executives from that organization. The look and the sound was perfect. Throughout that conversation, it was agreed. The ask was solidified, and that finance worker actually paid out $25 million to an account for the CFO. Now, 100% of that was AI deepfake and fraud. So that organization was out $25 million due to an actual deep fake where the initial communication started with a phishing attack. And we are starting to see that more and more. We're starting to see that with third-party vendors being spoofed or deep faked, if you will. There's been some recent reports that have come out that, recently come out, like second half of 2024 reports that are saying, on the dark web marketplaces, fish kits, which, are essentially just what it sounds like, right? The threat actors can buy fish kits. So it's, fish in a box type of thing where they can just set up their payloads. They can set up everything that they need and send out emails and, get return on their investment. But as it stands right now, the average out of all of the fish kits, that are being monitored across the dark web, deep web, around 82% of them actually have reference to deep fake implementations, whether it's email generation, video, or audio. And around 74% of those fish kits actually reference AI in some utilization factor. So what do we do, right? How can we do this? There's a lot of AI talk on the defender side right now. And, ironically, my CEO actually asked AI if AI could stop phishing attacks, right? To kind of see just, from the horse's mouth, if you will. And this was the response, which essentially says AI will help, which it can, but it's not foolproof. It's not going to cure all the ails of us, so to speak. It's a part of the puzzle, but it's not the entire puzzle. It's not the entire solution. That kind of gets into where our positioning is. And, in doing cybersecurity for over 25 years now, I wholeheartedly agree with this. Human intelligence to augment AI. AI is a tool that it will enable us to do more faster, to make some pattern matches faster. But all of that, all of the training of the AI, all of the utilization from a defender stance requires human intelligence. Here at Cofense, we've trained over 35 million Cofense reporters, if you will. Individuals, your employees, on what to look for and what to report, what is suspicious. And those individuals that do report that suspicious goes back to 12 to 15% of what they report are actual pieces of phishing attacks, malwares, credential phishing, BEC attacks that are making it into your inboxes. But those individuals that report that information, your SOC, intelligence functions, receiving that intelligence of what made it in and being able to act on that quickly makes a difference because now it protects the rest of it. It's kind of like a vaccination, if you will, right? Herd immunity. The more people that are kind of reporting and kind of covered and educated, the better the whole actually is. And knowing that level of intelligence that helps your analyst, helps your SOC so they're not weeding through all of the noise, because that is where a majority, I've managed a lot of SOCs, and a lot of it processing is noise. So, kind of like our positioning here within Cofense, and again, this is kind of why we're hot on this topic, really, isn't so much as a sales pitch for us, but just in general, the value of layered intelligence and actually empowering your employees is, through our work, we've trained millions of reporters. We get well over 1 million emails reported into Cofense and through Cofense every single month. And of those, we have teams And we work with SOCs around the world to go through those emails, curate that intelligence, pull it out, build those correlations, and then actually feed that back into um, a nice curated targeted intelligence cycle that allows our customers, our employees, our managed services, our analysts to quickly review and identify known threats and emerging threats, which can also then be used to augment AI, ML processes to streamline everything. The reality is we can't live on islands anymore because we're all getting targeted with the same types of threats. And to be able to try to really get ahead of the game, even from a defender AI stance, we need good data. We need solid data. We need rounded data, fleshed out data, I should say. And we need it in a more real time manner than we're getting across the board now. That being said, I'm going to pass this over to Jason Muir, who's going to talk about some application of AI in the defense space. Jason, it's all yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Muir. I'm the product manager for the triage and vision applications at Cofense. Today, myself, Lee, and Jared will talk about how we are actually applying AI within our product suite. So let's go ahead and dive into this real quick. I know that Josh already brought up this chart, but I want to touch on it again because it's very relevant, especially when we're talking about the application of AI. There is a custom shape to the emails that are making it into your organization. Again, there are sort of like a general purpose emails that everyone is seeing. There's some category specific stuff that's going to be impacting only maybe your industry vertical. And then there's going to be very targeted emails that are going directly to a user or a specific set of users in your organization. When we talk about the defensive layers that we're going to talk about in the next few slides, we need to address the fact that the edge is missing stuff already. And we know that for a fact. We know that things are making it through, or it's making it past your SEG, it's making it past your spam filters. There's a lot of emails that are going into organizations that are not wanted. And I'm going to focus more on the spam side of things. So when we talk about spam making it in, you could have two companies that are basically exactly the same, have the same tech stack, but just small configuration changes inside of their Exchange environment will allow different types of emails into those organizations. So every organization is going to see a slightly different spam profile. Essentially, what is actually going to get into your organization and make it past your edge defenses that were set up to block this stuff, and it's going to be very unique to your org. So that's almost like a fingerprint for what is spam inside of your org. Now, SEGs that are AI enabled still miss this stuff. And there's a good reason for that, because most of these SEGs that are AI enabled are trained on general data, which is just, what everyone is seeing. It's the mass mailer stuff. It's the stuff that everyone is getting. And so it can train on that and it can detect that, but it's only going to detect what it knows, which is, again, just sort of the general spam profile for everyone. So it'll block that. But there is a better way. And when we talk about AI a little bit further here, we're going to see how that applies. These threats, we need to talk about your analysts too, right? Your analysts possess a very specific domain knowledge. They know exactly what is in your org, what is considered spam, what is considered business communications, and what is considered malware to your organization. And that may change for every org. Everyone's going to have a different idea of what is truly spam versus business communications. Malware, not so much, but on those two fronts, your analysts know precisely what is spam to your people and what is real business communications. And so there's an issue with that. When people are reporting in spam and business communications, that's a lot of emails for the SOC team to process through. We want them to be able to focus and direct their domain specific knowledge towards the real threats that your organization is seeing. So because there's a lot of spam making it in, and because those users in your organization are doing the right thing and reporting stuff, it's going to end up being analyzed by your SOC analysts. And so when we want to apply AI to this, we need to start thinking about how can we do this so that it's very unique to your org, it's highly accurate, and it's going to make automation very easy. So the SOC spam challenge, let me talk about this real quick. I've already addressed this a little bit, but really there is a large amount of emails that make it into most SOCs when we're talking about a reporting culture that's good. And that's because we want our users to report emails in when there's something that in the back of their head saying, hey, this is probably not right. There's something wrong with this. But that leads to people who are maybe not so technical sending in a lot of spam. Um, on average, we see around 30% spam submissions to our triage application. The PDC alone, though, sees a 44% spam submission on across the board. And that's a lot of emails. I mean, that's almost half of the emails that are making it into your security application for analysis that are really just considered mostly junk. That leads to cost, right? You have to have people to manage all of that flow. You have less time for the analyst to actually look at the real threats, which is what you want them doing. And it's really just because there's some ineffective filters. We want those users to continue that reporting culture, to send those emails in. But if they're sending in a lot of spam, we have to address that. And so we, as a company, started taking some feedback from users. And really, we got a very clear problem statement from our users, which was, as a SOC analyst, I need a way to better identify emails that are considered spam from our workbench. This would allow me to quickly remove them and analyze malicious emails instead. So we took a look at this and we decided that we're going to incorporate AI to help reduce this problem. Now, we chose a Bayesian algorithm, which is very efficient. It runs on the triage application. It doesn't require external data sharing. It doesn't require GPUs. It doesn't require even additional resources. This will run directly on your application and help you to identify spam emails. So what is this feature that we released? Well, we're calling it the AI spam filter, AISF for short. And I like to personally call this the no work wasted feature. And now there's a good reason for that. When analysts are using our application, typically they're going through and they're having to process out those business communications and those spam emails. And they're also doing that while they're also looking at malicious emails. Well, in the scenario where we've applied this, there is a real-time training component to it. It's not like the general segs where they're doing a 2-week cycle on training. This is real time. It's pushing the data directly to the model, updating it while the analysts are working. They are able to take anything that they categorize as a spam or a business communication email and send it into this model so that way it's able to train it and update it. And then the next email that comes in will be scored with an updated model. This allows for us to basically take an application or take a triage appliance that's been in use for a while and pre-train it with the work that you've already done. Analysts can go in, select the categories, and then push that historical data directly to the model and get it up to speed and useful in a very short period of time. Again, because triage has multiple different categories and the ability to create custom categories, we allow for you to select the categories that best align with both spam and legitimate communications to train that Bayesian model to make that determination. There's also the component of automatic learning and unlearning. So if there's a case where someone makes a mistake and accidentally classifies something as spam when it was really business communications, the Trias application will actually take that in real time, unlearn that message, and relearn it as a separate category. So this is where we talk about real-time AI updates that are going to be effective immediately against what you're seeing come in. And in testing, this has actually proven very, very effective against the spam issue. We're able to basically process things out with around a 97 to 98% efficacy rate for spam determination. Now, at Cofense, we don't think AI replaces human intelligence. We absolutely do not believe that. We think that it's an augment to human intelligence. And so we have configured this particular feature so that it will augment your analyst's domain knowledge. Again, that domain knowledge is very important to your org because your analysts will know exactly what's a threat and what's not. And they can take their knowledge, tweak rules and triggers inside of triage, and incorporate the AI score as their logic to process something out. So that's really important. We believe in a human in the loop when we're talking about AI and application towards security, because really AI systems do need to be watched. They need to be trained. And including this inside of triage in this manner allows for human training of the model itself, which is very unique and almost bespoke to your organization because of the fact that that spam profile is very, very different between organizations. We're able to train on that and then basically give you a very high fidelity spam filter in triage to reduce the amount of spam that you're seeing and focus on the real threats. That efficiency is just going to really help analysts to detect the bad and move on from working on spam stuff. efficiencies like this are actually the way that we actually take and turn threats into actionable training materials. And I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Lee so that he can talk about how we're using generative AI to create new content.
Thanks, Jason. So my name is Lee Martin. I'm the Senior Director of Product for Cofense for everything SAT, and that includes our content. So we're going to shift gears just slightly, and I'm going to talk about how Cofense is using AI from a generative sense to not just gain efficiency, but to create more engaging content, but also I'm going to lead into a little bit about how we're also able to use technology that is modeled in deepfakes to help make your learning population more resilient against these evolving threats in the threat landscape. So the example that I'm going to use to illustrate this is something called a metahuman. This is something that we're using in certain aspects of our training to develop characters, 3D animated characters. So some of you may have heard of a metahuman, some of you may not. What is a metahuman? So metahuman is also a software suite, but it's a realistic digital person. It's a creator that was made by Unreal Engine, which is actually a game engine. And this is a framework that we are able to use to create really very realistic digital human avatars and characters for our trainings. The example that I'm going to walk you through actually will show you the progression from a human actor who's working on a script that was in one of our trainings about deepfakes, and watch the progression of using these AI augmented tools to take a performance of a human actor and translate them all the way through a few steps into a digital character that's very different from the actor. We can do the same thing with, this is just one of the tools that we use, and I'm just using this as an example. There are other tools that create such highly realistic avatars that you can't really tell the difference unless you're very practiced at looking at them. And there's a couple of benefits here. Number one, normally when we were in previous versions of Unreal Engine, when we were keyframe animating our characters, that meant that every one of these colored sections on this face mesh here that I'm showing would have to be individually animated to catch a facial expression, the position of the mouth, the teeth, the tongue, even the eyes. It was really labor intensive and would often, stretch out production for a long time. Using something that they produced called LiveLink, we were able to start capturing, even on a mobile phone, a performance of a human character and build a mesh all in one step. So step one was to build a mesh. This was actually shot on a cell phone in our actress's closet. So in this case, and Josh, you may have to push play for me because it's not playing, but there we go. Thanks. You can see that we have a still of our actress looking off camera, and using the LiveLink tool, we're able to overlay a mesh right on top of her face to map all of the different muscles that are going to be involved in the character's movement. So this is the first step. This is not animation. This is just building the model. The next step is actually going to be to take this model and build out a metahuman character. So in this case, we're going to capture a little bit of performance, and we're going to take that performance from the actor, have the mesh do the performance, and then build the character on top of the mesh. It sounds complicated, but it's actually something that you can do in a matter of minutes. It actually can come together pretty quickly once you have all of the background work done. Without AI augmentation, this would be a very labor-intensive process, and you wouldn't get nearly the level of fidelity. One of the things we've struggled with for years in digital animation is good lip sync. It's always been able to be done, but it just takes a lot of work. This really lightens the load and makes it much easier. From a threat actor standpoint, this is something that they're going to be using, not necessarily, LiveLink in this case, but the idea of a threat actor being able to cheaply achieve high fidelity lip sync in a digital representation of a person is pretty scary. We want to use that too to train your folks on what to look for cues. And one of the best things to do that is practice. So here's a real quick example where you're going to see our actor do a performance, and you're going to start to see the mesh move in conjunction, and then this character over on the right-hand side do the same thing.
Neo Cyber City can be a rough place. And you never know what form danger may take. You ever hear the one about the cybermorph and the deepfake? Yeah, it's a real page turner.
So if you notice, it's not just capturing the movements of the facial muscles and the expressions, it's also capturing head movements and all of those natural small movements that humans make that make us look real. Um, when you just see somebody sort of static moving, their head's not moving at all, you notice you might have a sixth sense, some unconscious view that, hey, this isn't really moving right. You sort of have this suspicion or intuition that something is just a little bit off. These tools are chipping away at all the things that alert your psyche that you're not looking at a real person. So once you have the performance captured, we actually have another step, which is we take Shire, our actor over here on the left-hand side, and through these different steps, we convert her into a completely different character who's called Veronique over on the right-hand side. And we have the final
Neo Cyber City
capture
can be a rough
transferred.
place. And you never know what form danger may take. You ever hear the one about the cybermorph and the deepfake? Yeah, it's a real page turner.
So the evolution of the quality that we're able to get, and once again, Unreal Engine is not photorealistic. This is not what we're going for here. This is a stylized view that we're just using as an example. Is that just over a year, we're able to see substantial evolution towards more and more and more fidelity. The picture on the right is a Veronique character that we built in 2023. The one on the left is one that we built this year, this summer. Just in that short period of time, we've evolved quite a bit and are continuing to push the boundaries there with the help of these tools. Our anticipation is that we're going to continue to see deepfake technology used to mimic human beings, and we're going to continue to add content that empowers your learner population to recognize when they might be interacting with a deepfake or when they might be interacting with something that's augmented by AI in some way. These tools are going to help us do that. And speaking more on AI augmentation, I'm going to hand this over to Jared, and he's going to take you further.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. That's some really impressive stuff there, and I hope that it really catches traction with all of our attendees here today. What I'd like to really emphasize here, as we transition to talking about intelligence and how we're applying it, is to echo what my colleagues here are saying, and it is truly the augmentation. How are we implementing artificial intelligence to include machine learning, large language models, everything under the umbrella of AI? To better enhance our capabilities to ultimately counter cyber threats, right? Cofans stands firm and strongly supports the concept that we need to have a human in the analytic loop. Artificial intelligence is fantastic as an enabler, as an additional capability, something that can augment what we are already doing, to include utilizing tried and true analytic models, to include most notably the intelligence cycle, the five-step cycle. This has stood the test of time. It was developed a very long time ago. So we are not keen to just throw it out and reinvent the wheel. Rather, we must talk about how we can utilize AI to augment and add additional capabilities to better enhance each of those steps within the intelligence cycle itself. So specific to what Lee was just covering there, we can use AI to generate the training and education content, but also we can utilize AI ML to generate the themes that we can pull from the intelligence products, the intelligence analysis itself. The One of the issues that a lot of us have with data analysis or technical data sets is that there's a lot of it. And because of that, it takes a long time to collect and process it. Collection is one of the steps of the traditional intelligence cycle. And what a lot of programs fall into the trap of is that it takes about 80% of your time, your energy, your investment to actually just collect and process that, which doesn't leave a lot of time to do the human vetted analysis. We really need to flip that model on its head, and we can utilize AI to enable that so that we can ultimately try to reach the 20% time in collection and processing and free up an additional 60% or get up to like the 80% of actually doing real analysis on the data itself. So some of the ways that this can be applied here is through categorization ahead of time, right? Before the analysts, before your humans actually and your researchers actually are looking at the data, AI can be used to process and churn through the data itself to do any type of categorization and classification. Specifically, if we're talking about malware events and credential phishing campaigns. There are some steps that are repeatable from the human perspective, and we can use an artificial intelligence to learn from the human workflows to do that classification before it even comes across the desk of the human themselves, saving them time, increasing the efficiency of that process itself, and then also helping identify what the connections are between disparate data sets. We're talking about correlations that happen automatically through automations. We've always had machine learning models in play here within our automation stack at Cofense, but also we can take a look and see what other types of data that may have previously been or unforeseen in their connections to the credential phishing and the malware email data sets, and actually overlay them with it to pull out any contextual information and present it to the analyst. So that way they can get a better picture of what's going on, so they can get closer to asking why in a more expedient fashion. Why is something like this? Why are we seeing this trend? Specifically right now within the US, obviously a big topic is the physical world events of like the election that's going on. So we know that from a human mindset, but AI can also be used to pull in that information from other, again, disparate data sets that were seemingly unconnected to say there is a global event happening here. And so we should look at the data and see how does that correlate with what we're seeing from a decrease, or an absence of, or an increase in the trend lines in the data itself. So ultimately, what this does is it enables our analysts to enhance their investigations and their reporting. We can dive deeper into campaigns because, again, we're saving time on the collection and processing. So it frees up our analysts to actually do further research, to do the forensics, to have more time to dig into and deconstruct malware events, and ultimately also feed the AI models with the intelligence that our humans are putting back into it to identify characteristics that can, again, in turn, complete this cycle or continue this cycle of analyzing future events and trends that we are seeing appear. On the right, you see the diagram of that five-step process, and there's just some of the areas that we are applying and can apply AI and associated models. Again, we're looking at event type classifications, but we're also looking at now what the content suggestions are or audience recommendations. Identifying an audience for the intelligence output has not always been very transparent or apparent to a product like intelligence. A lot of people, most people, I think, would acknowledge that intelligence is important, but we don't know how exactly to use it. AI can show us you have portions of your audience who are ingesting and utilizing this information, but have you also thought about where it could be applied elsewhere in the market? This is reflected in the outputs of intelligence, such as like finished intelligence reports, which is all process intelligence that comes ultimately again from the human mind. But interacting with AI from a human standpoint just creates a larger capability, a more complex capability that ultimately leads to better security through better trend and characteristic identification within technical data sets while being looked at through the lens of human analysis. So with that, Josh, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, so we've gone through a lot of information relatively quickly. Obviously, though, each of the points that we've talked about today, we could probably spend a good hour briefing on each of those, if not more. So we're trying to really cover the spread, if you will, of really what's encompassed in the current threat landscape when it comes to AI and phishing. We do have a question option in the Zoom. So please, anybody with questions, please feel free to enter them in, and we'll address all that we can. We do have a couple of initial questions that we'll field across here. So one of the first ones we received is, excuse me, have we, Cofense, have we seen an increase in phishing attacks that we feel are from AI sources? I'll take this one just based on what I've seen within our phishing defense center and obviously through our intelligence product and team as well. We have seen an increase in phishing attacks. The reality is the old way is still happening. We're still seeing those volumes, but there is now a new increase of what we're seeing for cleaner emails, less grammar issues, much cleaner focus, more timely, so a much quicker response overall, insofar as, or I should say, a much quicker. Well, no, response is the right word. Response to events that are occurring. So really, what we're seeing is we are seeing an increase in volume and a quicker volume based on situations that occur, geopolitical, environmental, across the board. While we can't say for certainty that those are due to AI, the patterns match. So for all that, I say with confidence that yes, we are seeing an increase due to AI threats, specifically. Jared, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, absolutely. From the intelligence standpoint, I historically, I think everybody here probably is familiar with spear phishing, right? And that's the very targeted, very curated messaging and content that is aimed at hitting a VIP target, right? With the advent of and implementation of AI, we are starting to see that spear phishing is taking more of a machine gun approach, or it's basically enabling that to be spread into a much larger campaign. So yes, it's still spear phishing by characteristic, as Josh was just alluding to there, but now threat actors are able to, for relatively cheap and very efficiently, spread out that curated, targeted message to a much larger audience. So spear phishing has always been a very critical threat, but it's always been in very small applications. We're starting to see that now by leveraging AI, these threat actors can increase their target base with much more curated and specialized information, ultimately to help try and decrease the level of paranoia or security that people think that they may have in dealing with email information or email data. And it is a very, very real threat that is only increasing day to day as we see it here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we have another question. Jason, actually, this one will be for you. The question is, if an analyst adds an email accidentally to the spam modeling within the triage points that you were talking about, does that mean you got to kind of delete the entire model and start over again, or is there a better way of handling that?
No, in fact, we designed the application so that you could unlearn messages. There's a specific button for that, so you can go in and actually just click it and say unlearn from spam or business communications. And then we also built it so that anytime a report is recategorized from one category to another, we will automatically handle that unlearning and relearning process. So that way, the bulk actions feature that we've just incorporated in 128 will allow for you to mass recategorize reports. If that is something that happens, the model will be updated dynamically from that action.
Nice. Another question that came in, Lee, actually, this one's for you. Are there certain things, or really what should we look for or look at when we're trying to detect if something is a deep fake or if it's computer generated, whether it's video or audio?
Yeah, that's a question we often get, and there's a couple of things that instead of talking about specific indicators of a deep fake, because depending on the technology that is being used, it could be incredibly subtle. And from a tactic standpoint, when I'm looking at it from a training standpoint, you really need practice looking at AI generated deep fakes to get some of the very, very subtle cues for things that are photorealistic. And to Josh's point, I think what usually in the real events, incredibly compelling, if not straight up no indicator at all. If when you start working with deepfake technology, at a certain point things start to pop for you. You start seeing that the lighting often is a little bit too perfect. But really what you want to train your learner population on is not to look for subtle visual cues of a deep fake, but to really fall back on the context of the situation. Because the deep fake is just a wedge to get you to do something that you would not normally do to expose you or your company to risk. And in that case, it's very similar to the same emotional regulation that you want to do when you are looking at a potential phishing email. Is this interaction, even if it's coming through a video, is it a normal way that this person would interact with you? Are they asking you for something you would normally do? Are they asking for you to break a policy, a procedure, a rule, something like this? Is there a way for you to validate this outside the confines of the interaction? We say this in phishing defense all the time. Follow up with a phone call if it doesn't make sense. If you're interacting with somebody on a video call and it just doesn't feel right and it just really is odd, hey, can you follow up with an email just to make sure I'm sure what you're looking for as I go through this so that you can see that you're getting it from the right person or, some other way of verifying. That second step of verification will almost always break the threat actor's flow, and you'll be able to either expose them or extract yourself from the threat. So long answer, multifaceted. It's only going to get more complicated as threat fidelity gets higher and higher and higher. But that context is always going to be the same. They're asking you to do something out of the norm. Build that level of sensitivity, awareness, and suspicion, and you'll be better off.
Absolutely. And actually, to lead on to that a little bit, if I could, we just got another question in regards to, how can we help with aiding in, what emails are legitimate or not regarding, do we use more email signing, email encryption, point to point? The reality is from what we've seen in doing this for years, right? What we've seen is you can't generally always have technology solve a people concern, and you can't use people to solve a technology concern, right? You got to kind of balance the odds. So, as Lee was saying, I mean, we have obviously everybody has email security, right? And we're constantly tuning it and tweaking it. And there's always going to be that 20% that kind of gets through, right? It's kind of like the old antivirus, right? It covers the 80%. We want to cover the 20%. And, what we've been kind of saying is, as Lee was actually saying just now, is are there technical things that we can look at? I mean, yes, obviously, if we all, implemented SPF, DKIM, and other, point-to-point encryption, things, key signing and all that, that could absolutely help. Those things have been around for well over a decade, and most of us aren't still using those. So, because there is cost implementation technology, technological challenges. But to Lee's point, what we've been actually kind of, I wouldn't say promoting, but relaying is trust but verify, right? If my CEO texts me on my phone from a phone number that I don't have, or sends me an email that's not from our corporate email saying, call me at this number that isn't his number, have a healthy dose of skepticism, right? One of the other items we've been talking about is keywords or code words, if you will. For any large transfer, maybe a finance team has to give a code word. So now if you're talking to that CFO and they're asking for this, out of procedure, out of normal process transfer of funds, okay? And the code word is like pre-established policies. The other is, we have a fear, generally speaking, of not asking, not verifying. If my CEO asks me to do something that's urgent, needs to be done now, do I really want to go out of band, text him on Slack or what I know his phone number to be, or Teams or whatever you use to verify it? Is he going to be mad at me? No, he's not, because you just potentially saved the company. And, the prior example we gave about the organization out of Hong Kong, just could have saved the company $25 million for an extra 2 minutes Q&A of, is this really you? Are you really asking me to do this? As the AI attacks are getting cleaner, as deepfakes, we're going to get to a point where the deepfakes are not distinguishable at all. So it's going to be the subsequent policies and processes that are actually going to have more value. So it's one of those things. Start baking them in early is my own opinion, because that's your safeguard, really. I mean, that's kind of the back end of it, if you will. We do have another question. Are we seeing that SEGs themselves, the secure email gateways, are catching more or less emails, or phishing emails specific to AI generated phishing emails? Again, we can't really tell if they're AI generated. What we can say is we are seeing more emails that have almost perfect grammar, that are following defined structures, and they are an increase on the threat tactics that we generally attribute to financial fraud, because that's really the goal of most attackers, right, is to get some money. in saying all that, we can infer that yes, AI generated phishing attacks are making it into inboxes. Anecdotally, we've talked to a bunch of our customers and others, just in the field, so to speak, networks and contacts, and they have identified because they did make the phone call or because they did click on the Zoom link or the chat link, the video share link. And they were able to identify or at least confirm at some point that it was a deep fake. So yes, these threats are actually making it to the inbox. This isn't just, hyperbole. This isn't just scare tactics. It is actually happening in the real world. All right, let's see here if we have any other questions that have come in. Just want to make sure we're not kind of repeating ourselves here.
One last thing you could do is you could actually go to the Cofense website and check out our segments. That will actually give you a good overview of the threats that are actually making it past your gateways.
Oh, that's a solid point, Jason. To add on to that, between all of that intelligence that we collect from Cofense as a whole, right, and with the Phishing Defense Center, Jason brings a good point in that we do see what makes it in, right? What bypasses, we're not picking on anybody specifically, but really it's what makes it into your employees' inboxes. And we do take a subset of that and post them up on our website to give you the idea of what's actually being seen by your employees. In addition to that, we do have some other information on the Cofense site from an AI stance as well as from intelligence reports. Our blogs are all based generally on the threats that we see from our intelligence team, from our Phishing Defense Center, from our product teams. We did get another question in. How do you identify if a phishing is AI or not? The reality is you can't. With confidence. Let me rephrase that. You can't with confidence because they look. How do you know if a block of text was AI generated or somebody actually banged on the keyboard and typed it themselves? There's really limited indications that you can do that. We're asserting that we can tell that some of these emails, these phishing attacks, are AI generated because it is a stark deviation from current norms in so far as perfect grammar, some of the content, some of the reuse of content, things along those lines. Jared, do you have any insight on that on your side?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say fight fire with fire, right? So threat actors are using AI. That means that us as the security professionals within our apparatus, we have to use AI as well. But there's no silver bullet here, right? AI cannot always identify itself. And I thought what you said there about the trust but verify will always be true. The threats, the tactics, techniques, and procedures, the tools that are being used, constantly evolving, right? So we can't just plug in even a very complex generative AI model and just give it a one and done and say, okay, we're good to go. We can defend against the AI threat. The threat is always evolving to include utilizing AI from the threat actor perspective, which means that the way that we implement AI on the security side needs to continue to evolve as well. It's a constant back and forth battle. But additionally, we need to have as many sources as we can, as many capabilities as we can to continue to fight that, to include the humans, right? We need human intel analysts actually looking at the interaction of AI models, actually looking at our algorithms and our automation systems, but also looking at the events and how they are being processed by all of our security apparatus as well. Again, that falls back into that camp of trust but verify. You trust that this is an email. It could be AI or not, or AI generated or not. But what is the gut instinct, right? The machine will never be able to replicate a human's gut instinct. Is this expected traffic, right? All these tried and true tests, again, leaning back to my section there where I was talking about these models that we have that create this baseline. And then honestly, really leaning heavily onto what Lee was talking about there from the training and LMS side. A well-educated workforce who has a healthy degree of suspicion, skepticism, and paranoia because they are the ones that are interacting with this data. So can we tell with confidence every time that it has been AI generated? No, absolutely not. But that's why we have multiple avenues of analyzing these events. Jason?
Oh, so I just wanted to touch base and give the URL for the segments database. It's cofense.com/segmiss, SEGMISS.
Yep, no, appreciate that. Thank you. And that's a good call for that. So we're close to time here. I'm not seeing, there's a couple other questions coming in. Some of them we have already addressed. Give me a moment. Yeah, no. At this time, I'd really appreciate everybody's time for attending and listening. If you do have any questions that either weren't asked or weren't addressed, feel free by all means to reach out. to us. There's contact information on our website. As Jason mentioned, feel free to check out the resources we have on our website, including that SegMiss database, which was cofense.com/SegMiss, SEGMISS. And hopefully, I hope everybody has an amazing day and stay safe out there. Thanks, everybody.